In the silence of the oldest caves, where light never reaches, humans etched their first words into darkness. These are not just markings, but echoes of a voice long gone, whispering across time. They didn't write to tell a story, but to mark a presence, to claim a space, to remember what had been seen and felt in the dark. These are the first stories, born not of language, but of memory. Even the bones hold stories. In the earth, where the dead return to dust, we find remnants of those who came before. Each bone is a testament, a fragment of a life lived in the shadows of the past. These are not just relics. They are the first witnesses, the first storytellers, the ones who carved their truth into stone and bone, leaving behind a legacy that would outlast them all. To study these remnants is to listen to a voice that has not spoken in tens of thousands of years. It is a story told not in words, but in silence, in the weight of memory, in the quiet power of the past. This is where the first stories began. Not in books or screens, but in the dark, in the bones, in the silent language of stone. We are talking about the earliest attempts by humans to remember, to record, to make sense of the world around them. These were not words on paper, but symbols etched into stone and bones, the first traces of memory preserved in the material world. These markings were not random. They were purposeful, symbolic, and often tied to rituals, beliefs, or the passage of time. They were the first attempt to freeze the fleeting moment in something tangible, something that could outlast the person who made it. These artifacts are not just relics of the past. They are the first stories ever told, written not in ink, but in the language of survival, belief, and human connection. We are not just looking at the remains of a forgotten culture. We are looking at the very roots of human memory, the first way we chose to remember ourselves. You think your life is complicated, but imagine living in a world without words, without names, without a way to remember who you are or where you came from. That's the world the first humans lived in, and it's a world we've forgotten. Every story we tell today, every law we follow, every truth we believe, these all began with a single mark on stone, or a bone shaped by human hands. It's not just history, it's the foundation of everything we are. When you look at a bone with a carved symbol, you're not just looking at an object. You're looking at a bridge between the past and the present. A whisper from ancestors who tried to remember the same way we do. You don't have to care about the first stories, but you should, because they are the silent witnesses to who we are. They are the roots of our stories, and without them, we are adrift in a sea of forgetting. The first stories were etched into stone, not with words, but with meaning. These were the silent voices of our ancestors, carved into the bones of the earth. We find them in the bones of the past, scattered across continents, each a relic of a forgotten tongue and a shared human memory. These stories were not written for the future, but told to the earth, so that the past might echo through the present. In the silence between the stones, we hear the voices of those who came before us, whispering through time. The first stories are not lost. They are waiting, embedded in the stone, waiting to be remembered. Long ago, people didn't write like we do. They told stories with their hands, carving into stone and bone. These were not just marks, but memories. Every line on the bone was a story. Every mark on the stone was a memory. They didn't write to share. They wrote to remember. They carved not for the present, but for the future, so that when the fire went out and the voices faded, the stories would still be there. It was not about words, but about truth. The truth of who they were, where they came from, and what they believed. They wanted to be remembered. These stories were the first way to keep the past alive, not in books, but in stone. Not in voices, but in bones. Before the first mark was made, there was a need. A need to remember, to hold on to what had been, to preserve the fleeting and the enduring. They gathered in the dark, not for fear, but for purpose. The darkness was a canvas, the silence a promise. The first stories were about survival, about the past that shaped the present. The act of marking was not random. It was deliberate, a ritual of remembrance. Each line, each symbol, carried meaning, a coded language of the ancestors. They did not know they were writing history. But in the darkness, with tools of bone and stone, they laid the foundation of a legacy that would outlive them all. The first stories were not meant to be read. They were meant to be felt, to be remembered, to echo through time until the next hands would find them. The first stories were not written in ink, but etched in time. These carvings, these marks on stone and bone, were the first attempt to freeze memory in form, to make the ephemeral permanent. The act of carving was not idle. It was deliberate, an expression of intent. Each strike of the flint, each press of the stylus, was a choice made in the dark, a declaration of what mattered to those who made it. The carver's hand was guided by memory, by the rhythm of the past. Each line was a thread in the tapestry of time, a way to make the unseen seen, the lost found. This was not mere decoration. It was a language of survival, of remembrance, of identity. The first stories were not just told. They were made, chiseled, pressed, and preserved. The mechanism of memory was thus born, to take the fleeting and make it enduring, to take the human and make it timeless, to take the story and make it stone. The third step is not about adding more, but about altering the past to make it fit the present. The carver does not simply record what they see, but what they believe should have been seen. This is where the story becomes more than a record. It becomes a version of truth, shaped by memory, belief, and the need to explain what is otherwise inexplicable. The carver must choose which elements to preserve and which to omit, for the story must serve not only the bones, but the people who will one day read it. This is how history is not just told, but rewritten. The bones remain, but the story is a mirror held to the past, reflecting the present through the lens of memory. The clever twist is not in the stone, but in the hand that shapes it. The choice to make the past serve the present, and the present serve the story. Beneath the surface of the earth, where time has pressed its weight upon the bones, lies a language older than words. These remains are not just relics, but messages, encoded in the very structure of their form. In the lab, scientists use tools so delicate they seem like extensions of their hands. They trace the ridges, measure the angles, and reconstruct the lives of those who lived thousands of years before us. These bones are not just evidence. They are the foundation of a larger truth. They remind us that we are not just the inheritors of history, but part of a continuum that stretches beyond our grasp. The science of memory is not about preserving the past in isolation. It is about listening to the silence between the bones and letting it speak of the lives that once were and the stories that still remain. We are not just looking at bones. We are looking at the echoes of a people who once walked this earth and who, in their turn, were part of something much older and much greater than themselves. The stone is the memory. The bone is the body. They are not separate. They are the same thing. To carve a story into stone is to shape the truth into form. We do not write with ink and paper. We write with stone and bone. Our stories are not just told, they are etched into the earth itself, as if the ground remembers what we once were. These are not just artifacts. They are the language of the past, the grammar of the long dead. To look at them is to read a sentence written in silence, a word carved into the very fabric of time. We are not the first to dream, to build, to remember. We are only the latest in a long line of storytellers, each one trying to make sense of the world through the language of stone and bone. In this moment, we are not just looking at history. We are becoming part of it. The stone remembers, the bone echoes, and we are listening. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You've probably seen it before, a cave drawing of a bison or a handprint in red ochre. But have you ever paused to wonder what it meant to the person who made it? These are not just random marks. They are some of the first attempts by humans to capture the world, to fix it in place, to give it meaning. What was it like to be among the first to think, this is how we will remember? The birth of symbolism was not just an act of creation. It was an act of survival, of connection, of understanding the world in a new way. And so, we begin to see the first flicker of human culture, a spark that would light the way through time. So, what exactly are we talking about? It's not just about writing or symbols. It's about the first time humans looked at the world and saw something beyond the immediate. It's when we started to think, this mark means something, and this shape stands for something else. These weren't just random scratches. They were the first attempts to capture meaning, to translate the world into something that could be passed on, remembered, even shared across time and space. This was a leap from instinct to intention. It was the first step toward language, not just in speech, but in the way we built our understanding of the world around us. These symbols were the beginning of a way to see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. A way to imagine, to dream, and to create something that could outlive the moment it was made. We're not just looking at the past. We're looking at the foundation of everything that came after. The first symbols were the first whispers of a language that would eventually shape the way we think, speak, and record the world. You might think this is just about ancient drawings, but the way we record ideas shapes how we see the world. Every symbol we create is a step toward understanding ourselves. Symbols aren't just marks on a wall. They're the building blocks of language, culture, and even our sense of time. They help us remember, plan, and connect across generations. Every time you use a phone, write a note, or even smile at a meme, you're continuing a tradition that began in caves and on bones. It's all connected. This isn't just about history. It's about how we make sense of the world. Understanding how we started recording ideas helps us see how we still do it today. So, maybe you don't think about it much, but the way you communicate, create, and connect is deeply tied to these ancient symbols. That's why you should care. We begin with the first sparks of human thought. In the caves of Lascaux, early humans etched their world onto stone with charcoal and ochre. These were not just drawings. They were the first attempts to capture the intangible, to give form to the fleeting. As nomadic tribes moved across the plains, they began to carve symbols into bones and stones. These were not just for decoration, but for communication. Ways to remember, to warn, and to share the stories of their people. The transition from oral tradition to symbolic record was not sudden. It was a slow, deliberate evolution, driven by the need to preserve knowledge beyond the reach of memory. These early symbols were the roots of writing. By 3000 BCE, Mesopotamia had birthed one of the first writing systems. Cuneiform, a system of wedge-shaped marks, allowed humans to transcribe their thoughts, laws, and stories for the first time. It was a turning point in human history. From there, writing spread across the world like a river. Each culture adapted it to its own needs, giving rise to hieroglyphs, runes, and scripts that would shape the course of civilization itself. These marks on stone and clay were more than symbols. They were the first steps toward a shared human language, a way to bridge time and space, to leave a trace of who we were and who we might become. Imagine you're in a cave and you see something amazing. You want to tell your friends about it, but you can't just point and say, "Wow, that's cool." So you use sticks and charcoal to draw what you saw. You don't just draw the animal. You draw the whole story. How it moves, what it eats, where it lives. It's like telling a story with pictures. You don't just make marks for fun. You make them to remember, to share, to teach. That's how we started to write the world down. It's not just about the pictures. It's about the idea that one mark can stand for something bigger. That's how we began to think in symbols. Before any mark was made, there had to be a purpose, a need to remember, to communicate, to leave something behind. It wasn't just about drawing, it was about meaning. This was the first step, choosing the medium. Was it a stone, a bone, a piece of shell? Each surface had its own texture, its own resistance, its own story to tell. The medium wasn't just a surface. It was a partner in the act of creation. It shaped the way ideas were formed, the way meaning was built. The choice of medium was not arbitrary. It was a decision made with care, with intent, with the understanding that this mark would live on long after the hand that made it had moved on. It was not enough to have a surface. The mind had to be prepared. The act of recording was not just physical. It was a mental and spiritual commitment to preserving something of the self. Once symbols were created, the next step was to find a way to make them last. Early humans needed a surface that could hold these marks over time, not just in the moment. They turned to materials they could find in their environment: clay, stone, bones, or even wood. These surfaces became the first canvases for human expression. Tools were essential. A sharpened piece of flint, a piece of charcoal, or even a piece of shell were used to etch, carve, or paint these symbols into existence. This was more than just making a mark. It was encoding meaning. The material world became a repository for thoughts, stories, and knowledge that could outlive the body. The mechanism was simple, but it was revolutionary. It allowed for the first time in human history to store and transmit meaning across time and space. The clever twist came when people realized that symbols could represent ideas, not just objects. This was a shift from concrete to abstract thinking. Instead of just drawing an animal, they started drawing a symbol that stood for the concept of beast itself. It was the first step toward language. This shift allowed symbols to carry meaning beyond their form. They became tools for communication, memory, and even storytelling. With this, symbols moved from being a record of the world to a reflection of the human mind, a leap that would shape the course of history. Beneath the surface of these ancient carvings lies a quiet revolution in cognition. Our brains, still evolving, began to grasp the idea that symbols could carry meaning beyond the immediate, that a mark could represent something else entirely. This was not just drawing, it was thinking in a new dimension. Symbols allowed humans to externalize thought, to store ideas in the world itself, not just in memory. It was the first step toward language, toward culture, toward civilization. Archaeological findings now suggest that symbolic expression was not a rare occurrence, but a widespread and early phenomenon. This indicates that the cognitive leap was not a fluke, but a natural progression of human intelligence. This shift in thinking opened the door to the creation of art, the development of ritual, and the birth of shared meaning. It was the first time humans could look back and remember, not just live and forget. The science of symbolism is not just about what we made, but about how we came to understand ourselves. It was in these marks, these lines, that we found the first whispers of who we were becoming. Imagine a child drawing a stick figure, not to represent a person, but to mark a place, a moment, a thought. That's the essence of the first symbols, simple, direct, and full of meaning. These early marks were not art. They were language, a way to say here, now, or this is important. They were the first steps in making the invisible visible. We often think of symbols as abstract, but they were born from the simplest of gestures. A finger pointing, a mark in the dirt, a scratch on a bone. Each was a form of communication. This is how we began to record, not with words, but with images. And in doing so, we created the foundation of all human knowledge, memory, and meaning. Symbols are the first language. They are the bridge between thought and reality, the first step in building a world where ideas can live beyond the moment. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. Imagine a world where memory is not stored in your mind, but etched into something permanent. That's what life was like for the people of ancient Sumer, where the first written words ever made were born. These early people had no books, no records, just their own minds, which could forget, misremember, or fade with time. So they needed something more than memory alone. They didn't have letters or symbols, but they had the idea of using marks to represent ideas. The first step toward turning memory into something that could be shared, preserved, and studied. This was not just a technical achievement. It was a profound shift in how humans understood their own existence. For the first time, they could look back, remember, and write down what they had learned. And so, in the quiet hum of the ancient world, something extraordinary was born. A way to fix the fleeting nature of time, and to make memory endure. We're talking about the moment human memory stopped being oral and started being etched into clay. It was the first step in preserving knowledge beyond the lifespan of a single person. This wasn't just writing. It was a revolution. It allowed people to record transactions, laws, and stories, creating a shared history that could outlive the people who made it. The script itself was made by pressing a reed stylus into wet clay, creating wedge-shaped marks, hence the name Cuneiform, which means wedge-shaped writing. This was more than a tool for communication. It was a way to control information, to record power, and to shape the future of civilization. To understand cuneiform is to understand how the first people began to imagine a world where memory wasn't just passed down through speech, but could be stored and shared across time. You might not think about ancient writing, but it's the foundation of everything we remember today. Every story, law, and idea we hold in our minds was once etched into clay by hands that reached across millennia. Without cuneiform, there would be no records of trade, no laws to govern society, and no way to pass down knowledge from one generation to the next. It's the invisible thread that connects us to our past. Even in the digital age, we are still building on that first act of writing. The way we store and share information today is a direct descendant of the Sumerians' determination to remember. So, when you think about the past, remember that the first words ever written were not just symbols. They were the seeds of every idea, every law, and every story that has ever shaped our world. Sumer was not just a place. It was an idea. A society that dared to inscribe its thoughts, its laws, its prayers onto clay. This was no accident. It was the first act of memory, the first step towards civilization as we know it. Before cuneiform, stories were passed through speech, through song, through ritual. But with writing, the voice of the past could be preserved, even when the people who spoke it were gone. Cuneiform was born in the Euphrates Valley, in the city of Uruk, where people first gathered in numbers too great for memory alone. Writing was not just a tool, it was a promise, a way to remember who they were and who they had been. The symbols were not just words, they were shapes, marks that stood for ideas, for things, for the world itself. Each stroke carried the weight of history, the echo of a civilization's first breath. This was the dawn of written memory, and it changed everything. It gave people a way to remember, to record, to build upon the past. It was the first time humanity could truly remember itself. Imagine a world where people remember everything by talking, but one day, they need to keep things safe forever. That's when they started drawing pictures in clay to remember stories, names, and rules. These drawings were like a secret code. Only people who knew how to read them could understand what they meant. It was a big deal because it let them save knowledge for the future. They used something they had around them, clay. They pressed sticks into it to make those special shapes, like little wedges that became the first writing system in the world. This wasn't just about writing. It was about making sure the past didn't get lost, and that people could learn from it. It was the start of remembering forever. To begin, the scribe must prepare the clay tablet. A flat, moist surface, soft enough to impress the wedge-shaped marks. The clay is often taken from the banks of the Tigris or Euphrates, where the earth is rich and pliable. Once shaped, the tablet is placed on a flat surface, often a wooden board or a stone slab. This surface must be steady, for any tilt can distort the writing. The act of writing begins with the scribe pressing the stylus into the clay, making a wedge that will later be read as a symbol. Each mark is deliberate, a step toward preserving knowledge. With each stroke, the scribe lays down a symbol, a sign, a trace of thought. The tablet is a blank slate, yet with each mark, it becomes a vessel for the past, present, and future. This is the foundation of written memory. It is not just about the act of writing, but the intention behind it, the desire to preserve, to record, to remember. Once the wedge was pressed into the clay, the scribe would apply steady pressure with the stylus, carving out the first marks that would become words. Each stroke was deliberate, each shape a symbol that would carry meaning for generations. The depth and angle of the wedge determined the shape, and with it, the meaning. A single, straight wedge could represent a number, while a more complex arrangement might denote a name or a concept. Each symbol was a puzzle piece, and the scribe had to know exactly where it fit. The order of the symbols mattered. Just as words in a sentence shape meaning, so too did the arrangement of cuneiform signs. There was no room for error. A misplaced wedge could change the meaning of a word, and in the world of Sumer, a miswritten tablet could mean the difference between life and death. This was more than writing. It was a form of memory, a way to preserve thoughts across time and space. Every wedge carved into the clay was a bridge between the present and the future. But here's the clever twist. The scribe didn't just press the stylus into the clay. They rotated it, creating a wedge shape that could be read from left to right, and even from top to bottom. This wedge shape was a breakthrough. It allowed for more symbols to be created with a single tool, without needing separate marks for each idea. This innovation transformed writing from a collection of symbols into a structured system, one that could carry the weight of history, law, and knowledge. It was not just a tool, but a way of thinking, of organizing thought, of recording memory, and of leaving something behind that could outlive the scribe. This clever twist was the beginning of a new way to remember, not just as individuals, but as a civilization, building upon itself across generations. Beneath the clay tablets, in the silent layers of history, we find the first whispers of human thought, etched, pressed, and preserved. These are not just records. They are the fingerprints of a mind reaching out across time. The science of cuneiform is not in its form, but in its function. Each wedge, each angle is a deliberate choice, a system so precise it allowed a single scribe to hold the entire world in their hands. The science of cuneiform lies in its simplicity. A small number of symbols arranged with care could represent complex ideas: law, trade, love, and war. It was a language of precision, built for the world as it was. In the quiet of a Sumerian archive, these symbols hum with the weight of history. They are not just marks on clay, but the very pulse of human thought, the first heartbeat of written memory. This is the science of cuneiform, not just in the mechanics of writing, but in the way it changed what it meant to remember. It gave humanity its first tool to hold on to time itself. Imagine if your thoughts were etched into clay, not just remembered in your mind. That's what Sumerians did with cuneiform. Writing became their memory, their way of holding on to time. Just like we use books to store our stories, they used clay tablets to store theirs. Each mark was a thought, each line a moment, each tablet a lifetime. To the untrained eye, cuneiform looks like a jumble of symbols, but to the Sumerians it was a language of precision, a way to lock away the past and share it with the future. This is the power of writing, not just to record, but to remember, to preserve, to tell the story of a people who once lived without the crutch of letters. So next time you write something down, think of the Sumerians. They turned the ephemeral into the eternal, and in doing so, shaped the world we live in. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. In the stillness of time, there lies a silence so deep. It echoes with the voices of the past. These are not just objects, but the remnants of a memory lost to the ages, waiting to be unearthed. The ancient world did not write with ink and paper, but with the weight of history itself. In their hands, memory was not a fleeting thought, but a sacred trust, preserved in a fragile art of writing. To touch these scrolls is to touch the soul of a people who once ruled with words, whose minds carried the weight of their own legacy, and whose voices have been silenced by the passage of time. In this video, we will journey into the echoes of the past, tracing how memory was kept alive in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, where the written word was not just a tool, but a vessel of eternity. We are talking about the physical remnants of memory, the scrolls, tablets, and inscriptions that carried the voices of ancient civilizations. These are not just objects, but the vessels through which history spoke to itself. In Egypt, these were often written on papyrus, a plant-based material that, once dried, could last for centuries, or perish in the humid embrace of the Nile's floodwaters. In Mesopotamia, the clay tablets were the medium of choice. Each character was pressed into the wet clay with a reed stylus, leaving behind a mark that would endure long after the scribe's hand had forgotten. These texts were more than records. They were the minds of the ancients, captured in symbols and sounds, waiting for someone, somewhere, to bring them back to life. To study these is to glimpse into a world where memory was not just preserved, but inscribed, a way of holding on to the past when the present was uncertain. These scrolls are not just relics of the past. They are the silent voices of civilizations that shaped the world we live in today. They hold the knowledge, beliefs, and fears of people who built empires and left behind something far greater than stone. To study them is to glimpse into the minds of those who came before us. Their stories, prayers, and records are threads in the vast tapestry of human history, waiting to be unraveled by those who still care to listen. They are testaments to the power of human resilience, creativity, and the unyielding desire to record and pass on meaning across time. And in a time when so much is lost to time and neglect, these scrolls offer a rare, intimate connection to the past, one that demands our attention, our care, and our reverence. So, yes, you may not think you care, but in truth, you do. You care because you are part of the same story, and these scrolls are your ancestors' way of saying, remember. We begin in the Nile, where the first cities rose like whispers from the earth. The memory was etched not in stone, but in the minds of those who walked the banks of a river that never forgot. In Mesopotamia, the first scribes emerged, their reed styluses carving words into clay. Fragile, fleeting, yet binding the past to the present in a language that would outlive the empires it once served. In Egypt, memory took form in pyramids, their shapes reaching toward the sky as monuments to the eternal soul, and in temples where the gods were worshipped not just as deities but as living archives of time. As centuries passed, the scribes and priests became the keepers of memory, and the scrolls, tablets, and monuments became the fragile threads in a tapestry of history that we now strive to reweave. And so we stand at the edge of the ancient world, gazing back at the minds that shaped memory before us, their voices hushed, their stories waiting to be remembered. Imagine you're the first person to remember something important. You don't write it down, you just keep it in your head. That's how people remembered things in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. But remembering is like holding a fragile leaf in your hand. One day it's there, the next it's gone. That's why people made scrolls and tablets to keep their memories safe. So people built temples and pyramids to remind themselves of what mattered. They wanted to make sure their memories and the memories of their gods would never be lost. But even the greatest monuments fade. And that's why we still look at these scrolls today. They help us remember what they once held, even if the memory itself is gone. The first step in preserving memory was the creation of a physical medium: papyrus, clay, or stone. These materials were not chosen for their permanence, but for their ability to hold the weight of words, the imprint of a hand, and the trace of a mind. In the heart of ancient cities, scribes worked in quiet rooms where silence was sacred. The act of writing was not merely recording words, but shaping the world through the permanence of ink and stone. Each word inscribed was an act of defiance against the erosion of time. The scribe knew that to write was to immortalize, and that the weight of memory rested upon their hand. The materials themselves were imbued with meaning. Papyrus came from the Nile, clay from the earth, and stone from the mountains, each a link in the chain of memory from the land to the written word. The setup was simple in form, but profound in purpose. It was the foundation upon which all memory would rest, a fragile vessel for the thoughts of a people who sought to outlive the gods. The mechanism begins with the selection of a scribe, a person chosen not only for their skill, but for their fidelity to the past. They are the bridge between what was and what is, carrying the weight of memory with every stroke of their reed. They must first understand the context of what is to be recorded, whether it be a royal decree, a personal letter, or a religious hymn. The scribe must internalize the gravity of the moment to ensure its essence is preserved. The scribe's tools are not merely instruments. They are extensions of their will and their duty. The reed pen, the ink pot, the clay tablet, each object is imbued with meaning, a testament to the fragile yet enduring nature of memory. Once the writing is complete, the scribe may seal the scroll or tablet, a final act of protection and preservation. This is the moment when memory transitions from the ephemeral to the tangible, from thought to artifact. This is the mechanism at work, not just the act of writing, but the careful curation of memory, the transformation of the intangible into something that may endure beyond the reach of time. The clever twist lies in the interplay between memory and myth. The scribes did not merely record facts, they wove the past into the fabric of the present, turning history into a living narrative. They believed that by repeating the stories, they could preserve the soul of their ancestors, and in doing so, secure their own place in eternity. Memory was not passive, it was an act of devotion. Their method was a delicate balance between preservation and transformation. The past was not locked away, but rather it was reimagined, imbued with new life through the lens of the present. This is how they kept their world alive, by turning memory into a kind of ritual, a sacred act of remembrance that bound them to their ancestors and to each other. In their hands, memory was not just a record. It was a bridge, a vessel, a way to carry the weight of the world forward, step by step, into the unknown. Beneath the weight of time, the ancients carved their knowledge into stone, not just as memory, but as a science of survival. Every line, every symbol was a pulse of understanding, a heartbeat of a civilization reaching across the centuries. In Mesopotamia, the scribes of the city-states mapped the heavens not with eyes, but with numbers. They wove celestial patterns into their cuneiform, as if the stars themselves were a language of prediction and power. The Egyptians, too, built their knowledge on a foundation of precision. From the geometry of the pyramids to the calculations of the Nile's floods, They measured the world not in myths, but in units of time, space, and force. These were not mere records of the past, but blueprints for the future. They encoded a science of existence, a way to make sense of the unknown, to anchor the fleeting in the eternal. In their hands, memory was not just recollection. It was a force, a kind of alchemy that turned the transient into the enduring, the ephemeral into the eternal. Imagine the mind as a vast library, where every memory is a fragile scroll, carefully stored in the dark recesses of a temple. These scrolls are not just records. They are the very breath of a civilization, preserved against the erosion of time. In Egypt, the scribes were the custodians of this library, their hands moving with reverence over papyrus and ink, ensuring the voices of the past did not fade into silence. The scribes of Mesopotamia worked in a different kind of light, their clay tablets hardened by the sun, their words etched with the precision of a tool rather than the fluidity of a pen. Both traditions, though shaped by different materials and methods, shared a common purpose: to preserve the soul of a people, to ensure that even in the face of decay, their stories would endure. In this way, the memory of ancient civilizations is not just stored. It is carried, passed down, and made eternal through the hands of those who dared to remember. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You're sitting in a quiet room, the kind where books are not just objects, but silent witnesses to thought. You open one, and it feels like you're stepping into another mind, another time. In the ancient world, memory wasn't just a tool. It was a kind of magic, a way to preserve the soul's inner life across generations. Imagine, then, a civilization that didn't have the modern brain, but still saw the mind as something vast, something that could be organized, curated, even built. In the city of Athens, they didn't just write down history. They etched it into their very sense of self, believing that memory was the foundation of identity and knowledge. And in Rome, they built monuments not just of stone, but of memory, structures that would outlive their creators and carry the weight of their thoughts into eternity. So, what if the mind itself was seen as a kind of library, a place where knowledge, experience, and identity were stored, preserved, and passed on? So what exactly are we talking about? We're not just discussing memory as a passive storage system. We're exploring how the ancient Greeks and Romans conceptualized the mind as a kind of library, where thoughts, experiences, and knowledge are stored, retrieved, and even lost. In their view, memory was not just about remembering facts. It was a process of ordering, organizing, and even controlling the mind's contents. They saw it as a physical and mental space, much like a library, where you had to know where to look to find what you needed. This metaphor was not just poetic. It shaped how they thought about education, rhetoric, and even the structure of the human soul. Memory was a skill to be trained, like a librarian mastering the cataloging of a vast collection. The Greeks called this system the techne of memory, a technique, a craft, a discipline. It was a way of transforming the chaotic flow of thoughts into a structured, navigable space, much like a well-organized library. And yet, just as a library can be lost to time or mismanaged, so too could memory be lost, distorted, or even corrupted. The mind, they believed, was as fragile as any book left unprotected. The mind as a library isn't just an ancient metaphor. It's a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties about forgetting, identity, and the fragility of human experience. When we think about memory, we're not just recalling events. We're constructing ourselves, piece by piece, like an archivist preserving a life. To understand memory is to understand what it means to be human. A struggle between what we know and what we can hold on to. This isn't just about the past. It's about how we, too, are building mental libraries, and how we might one day forget the very act of building them. The mind as a library is a concept that transcends time, offering us a way to think about ourselves, our histories, and what we might lose if we don't care. We begin in the dim corridors of the Library of Alexandria, where scholars meticulously copied texts onto papyrus, their hands steady as they preserved the wisdom of the world. In Athens, around 400 BCE, the philosopher Plato sat in his garden, contemplating the nature of memory, as if searching for a way to etch thought into stone. By the time of Cicero, memory was not just a function of the mind, but a discipline, trained with artful methods to preserve the essence of knowledge. As the empire expanded, so did the methods of memory. New techniques emerged to organize and access the vast knowledge of a growing world. And so, the mind as a library took shape, not just in the minds of scholars, but in the very architecture of knowledge, built stone by stone, word by word. Imagine your brain as a library, full of books. Each book is a memory, and you're the librarian who knows where everything is. But unlike a library, your brain doesn't use shelves or labels. It just keeps everything in one place, sometimes even mixing up the stories. They called these tricks mnemonic devices, like a secret code to unlock your memory. It's like giving your brain a map instead of a list. So, your brain is like a library, but it's more like a puzzle. You don't just read the books, you piece them together to make sense of the world. And just like a library, your brain can forget things. But it can also remember, if you give it the right tools and a little practice. To understand how memory functions in the classical mind, we must first consider the foundational metaphor itself, the library. In this mental space, the mind is not merely a vault of information, but a structured, curated archive, organized with care and precision. The Greeks and Romans envisioned memory as a physical and intellectual construct, akin to a well-maintained library. Just as a librarian arranges books in order, the mind must establish a system for organizing knowledge, ensuring clarity and accessibility. The mind's library was not a passive repository, but an active space of engagement. Just as a librarian indexes and cross-references, the mind must connect ideas, linking them through memory techniques and mental associations. In this mental library, the act of remembering becomes an act of navigation. The mind must know where to find each idea, much like a scholar navigating the corridors of an ancient archive to retrieve a specific text. To lay the foundation for this system, the mind must first be trained to think in structured, categorized ways. Just as a library requires a catalog, so too must the mind develop a mental framework to support its function. The mind, like a library, is not just a collection of books. It is a system of retrieval. In classical thought, memory was understood as an art of ordering and accessing stored knowledge. The Greeks called this process mnemonike, a method of remembering through association. They used techniques like the method of loci, where memories were tied to specific places. This system required the mind to function like a map, where each location served as a mental node. To recall, one would mentally walk through the space, retrieving memories as they passed each spot. The Romans refined this practice, integrating it into their educational and rhetorical traditions. They saw memory not just as a tool, but as a reflection of the mind's capacity for order and discipline. In this way, memory was not just about remembering. It was about structuring, mastering, and making sense of the world through the lens of the mind's library. The third step in this intricate process is the clever twist, the moment when the mind's library becomes more than just a passive collection of books. It is here that memory transforms into something dynamic, something that can be restructured, recombined, and even reshaped. This twist is not random. It is guided by the mind's ability to form associations, to link unrelated ideas through shared images, sounds, or emotions. It is the moment when memory becomes not just stored, but also connected. This is the power of metaphor and symbol. By embedding meaning into forms, whether through words, images, or even spatial arrangements, the mind creates a kind of map, a way to navigate the vastness of its own memory. In this way, the mind's library is never static. It is a living, breathing entity, constantly being reorganized, refined, and reimagined. The clever twist is the spark that turns memory into art. This is how the mind becomes more than just a storehouse of knowledge. It becomes a place of transformation, where thoughts are not only remembered, but also reinterpreted, recombined, and reborn. Beneath the myths and metaphors, there was the science of memory in classical Greece and Rome, a system of knowledge encoded in the mind like a map of the soul. This science was not mere rote repetition, but a structured art, one that mapped thoughts and ideas into spatial patterns, making the mind a place of order and recall. These systems of memory were not just tools for scholars or orators. They were a way of thinking about the self, about how knowledge shaped identity and how the self could be shaped by knowledge. In this way, the mind was not just a passive container, but an active and dynamic space, a library where the soul could be trained, refined, and preserved. This ancient science of memory is not lost. It is alive in the methods we still use, in the ways we structure our thoughts and navigate the vast terrain of human knowledge. So, if we think of the mind as a library, we might imagine the memory as the catalog, the librarian, and the archive all at once. But in classical Greece and Rome, it was more like a storyteller recalling a tale, not a librarian organizing books. They didn't write down their memories as we do now. Instead, they trained their minds to recall through repetition, association, and the power of the spoken word. It was a form of mental acrobatics, not a systematic cataloging of information. This was not a flaw, but a feature, a kind of mental poetry, where the mind was a stage and the memory was the performance. It was not about accuracy in the modern sense, but about the ability to summon the past with vividness and rhythm. And in this, we find the beauty of their approach. They did not seek to preserve memory as a record, but to make it live again, to make it feel as if the past had never left. That's the magic of the mind as a library. It is not a vault, but a mirror. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. In the year 590, the world burned. Cities fell, libraries crumbled, and the weight of history seemed to vanish beneath the flames of chaos. But in the silence after the fire, a different kind of light began to flicker. Not in the streets, but in the cloisters where scribes hid books from the ashes of time. These were not just books. They were lifelines. The wisdom of the ancients, the teachings of the Greeks and Romans, and the sacred texts of faith, all guarded against oblivion. In the Dark Ages, knowledge was not a light. It was a whisper. A secret passed from one hand to another, from one soul to another. And so, in the silence of the monasteries, the world was not lost. It was preserved, hidden, and waiting, for the day it would be found again. So what exactly are we talking about? It's not just books or monks. It's a quiet, determined effort to hold on to the light when the world is dark. This was a time when knowledge was seen as dangerous, when the past was being erased, and the past was being erased, and the future was uncertain. Yet, in this silence, wisdom found a way to survive. The monasteries became the last great repositories of human thought, not because they were powerful, but because they chose to protect what others would forget. They were not just scribes, they were guardians of a fading world, ensuring that even in darkness, the light of reason would not be lost forever. This is the story of how knowledge survived, not by force, but by faith, not by power, but by persistence, not by shouting, but by silence and steady hands. You might think this is a story about monks and books, but it's really about the survival of human thought in a world that tried to erase it. The world around him was burning, not with fire, but with the slow, deliberate destruction of knowledge, of language, of memory. Without them, we would have no history, no science, no art, just a void a silence that would have swallowed everything. Their quiet rebellion, their silent resistance, is the reason we still have a world to think, to question, to dream. So when you read, when you learn, when you wonder, you are standing on the shoulders of those who dared to remember. The world burned, empires fell, libraries were reduced to ash. In the chaos, knowledge was not just lost, it was nearly erased. Amid the destruction, a quiet resistance took root. Monasteries became the last strongholds of learning, where scribes toiled in candlelight, preserving the wisdom of the ancients. These scribes were not just preserving words, they were saving the soul of civilization. Their work would outlive the wars, the kings, and the empires that had tried to silence them. In the Dark Ages, when the world seemed to be crumbling, these quiet custodians of knowledge ensured that the light of learning would not be extinguished. They did not fight with swords or armies, but with ink and faith. And in doing so, they shaped the future of the world. You know how sometimes when the world gets too loud, you need a quiet place to keep your stories safe? That's what the monks did. They locked their books in their little cells and said, "We will not let the dark take our words." They didn't just write down what they knew. They made sure it would live even when no one was looking. They copied every word, every picture, every lesson, like it was the last chance to remember. When the world burned, they hid in the cold. When the world forgot, they remembered. And when the world needed to start again, they gave it a beginning. They didn't just save books. They saved the idea that stories matter, that knowledge is worth more than gold, that even in the darkest times, there is a light you can carry. In the heart of a crumbling monastery, monks gathered in silence, their robes worn, their hands steady. They had long since accepted that the world beyond their walls was lost to fire and greed. Each morning, they began with the reading of ancient texts, not for glory, but for survival. These words were the last breath of a dying civilization, carried in fragile parchment and ink. They transcribed these works by hand, one letter at a time. Not for fame, but for the hope that future generations might one day know what had been lost. The act of copying was not just preservation, it was resistance. In a world that had turned its back on learning, they kept the light alive, one word at a time. They built their libraries in the quiet corners of the world, where the weight of history could not be erased by conquest or chaos. The first step was preservation, but the second was the careful copying of texts. Monks sat in dim candlelight, their hands steady, their minds focused on the task ahead. Each letter was a lifeline, a fragile thread in the tapestry of human thought. They used quills made from bird feathers, ink made from gall and iron, and paper that was often made from vellum. Every stroke was deliberate, every word a vow to keep the past from being lost forever. The process was slow, and mistakes were not easily corrected. A single error could unravel a whole passage, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on their shoulders. They copied not only religious texts, but also classical works, philosophy, science, medicine. These were the seeds of future knowledge, hidden in the safety of stone walls and wooden shelves. Each monastery became a repository of human thought, a quiet defiance against the darkness. The world outside burned and fell, but within these walls, the light of knowledge endured. But how did they manage to keep this knowledge alive without being caught? The answer lies in the clever twist of their strategy, one that hid the very thing they were trying to save. They didn't just copy books, they copied them in secret, in places where no one would expect to find learning. Monasteries became the silent engines of a quiet revolution, their walls echoing with the weight of words. The trick was not just in the act of copying, but in the way they framed it. Learning was not a crime. It was a duty, a prayer, a devotion to the divine. In this way, they could practice their craft without fear. This was a subtle form of resistance, a way to outmaneuver the forces that sought to erase knowledge. They did not fight with swords, but with ink and faith, preserving the past while shaping the future. In this way, the monasteries became the first true libraries of the world, their silence a testament to the courage of those who dared to remember. Beneath the crumbling stone walls, the monks toiled in silence, their hands stained with ink and dust, transcribing fragile scrolls that held the weight of centuries. In the quiet of the cloister, they preserved not only words, but the very pulse of human thought, beating against the darkness like a distant drum. It measured time in hours and seasons, charting the heavens with precision, knowing that the stars were the last true guides in a world that had forgotten how to look up. Their work was not just about saving books. It was about keeping alive the light of reason, even as the world around them crumbled into ignorance. In the hush of the scriptorium, the science of preservation became a sacred act, one that would outlive the darkness and rekindle the fire of knowledge. Imagine a world where knowledge is a flame, and the dark ages are a storm. The monasteries are the only places where this flame is kept alive, protected from the winds of ignorance. These monks are not just scribes, but keepers of a fragile legacy. They copy each word, each line, with the reverence of those who know they may be the last to hold it. They are not scholars in the modern sense, but their work is the foundation of what we now call scholarship. They are the unsung heroes of the intellectual world. Their work was not understood in their time, but it would shape the future. They were not visionaries, but they built the path that others would walk. So in the end, the monasteries were not just places of prayer, but the cradle of civilization. A place where the light of knowledge was not lost, but carried, one page at a time. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You ever wonder how a single idea can change the world? Not just any idea. Something so ancient it was forgotten, then rediscovered in a moment that reshaped the future. This is the story of memory. Not just how we remember, but how we create, how we build, how we become. To understand this era, you have to look beyond the paintings and inventions. You have to look at the mind itself. In the Renaissance, memory was not just a faculty. It was an art, a science, and a revolution. This is the story of how memory shaped the Renaissance mind, and how that mind, in turn, shaped the world. So what exactly are we talking about? We're not just talking about books or paintings. We're talking about the very architecture of thought itself, the way the human mind was once believed to be built, like a cathedral, with memory as its foundation. The Renaissance was a time when the mind was seen as a kind of workshop, where ideas were shaped, stored, and called upon with precision. It was as much about science as it was about art. Memory was not just a passive thing. It was a craft, a skill, a system of art and logic. Think of it as the Renaissance version of digital code, written in the language of the mind. The goal was to make the mind an instrument, to give it the tools to hold vast knowledge, to retrieve it with clarity, and to use it as a foundation for creativity and discovery. This was not just about remembering. It was about mastering the self, and through that, mastering the world. It was the Renaissance mind at its most ambitious, building a system of thought that could rival the cosmos. You think memory is just about recalling facts, but it's really about how we shape reality. Every time you remember something, you're not just retrieving the past, you're recreating it, and that's where the real power lies. The Renaissance thinkers didn't just study memory. They used it as a tool to build their worlds. They knew that if you could control memory, you could control truth, and that's a kind of magic that still feels relevant today. The deeper you go into their methods, the more you realize they weren't just scholars. They were architects of thought, designing the very frameworks we use to navigate knowledge and creativity. So why should you care? Because understanding memory in this way, seeing it as both art and science, helps you see how your mind works, and that's the first step to mastering it. It's not just about the past, it's about the present. The Renaissance mind teaches us that memory is not a passive thing. It's a craft, and if you learn how to shape it, you shape your own reality. The Renaissance was not just a rebirth of art, but a reawakening of the mind. It was a time when knowledge was a weapon, and memory was its shield. From the fall of Constantinople to the printing press, knowledge moved like a river, carving new paths through the minds of scholars and thinkers. They built their mental architectures using mnemonics, turning memory into an art form, like a painter crafting a masterpiece from memory alone. This was a period of intellectual daring, where the mind was both a battleground and a canvas, where knowledge was not just preserved, but reimagined. And so, memory became not just a tool, but a testament to the Renaissance mind, a bridge between the ancient and the modern, the seen and the unseen. Imagine your brain as a castle, and memory as the way you walk through it. Every room is a story, every wall is a picture. You don't just remember, you live it. The Renaissance thinkers didn't just write down things, they built them. They made memory a kind of art, a way to bring the past to life in your mind. They used tools, like memory palaces, to organize thoughts in a way that felt real, even magical. It was a science of the soul, a way to make the mind a kind of museum. Memory, to them, was both a science and a story. It was how we made sense of the world, how we kept the past alive in the present, and how we dreamed of the future. To begin, the mind must be prepared like an artist's studio, ordered, clean, and ready for creation. The first step is to clear the mental space, to empty the mind of distractions and let the structure of memory take hold. This preparation is not just about silence, but about intention. The mind must be set in a state of readiness, where the memory can be placed with precision and clarity, like a stone in a riverbed before the current begins to flow. The mind is like a chamber with walls that can be inscribed with knowledge. Before placing anything, the walls must be smooth and free of imperfections, for the memory must rest on a solid foundation. This act of preparation is both physical and mental. The scholar must be present, focused, and grounded. The mind must be still, yet open, like a canvas before the first stroke of the brush. Only when the mind is fully prepared can the process of memory-making truly begin. The structure is laid, the space is clear, and the mind is open to receive the first image, the first idea, the first spark of knowledge. To build this memory palace, the mind must first locate a familiar structure. A house, a garden, a street. Each space becomes a vessel for thought. Each room represents a concept, each object a detail. The mind must place these with precision, so the memory is not just stored, but mapped. The mind must then walk through the structure, recalling each object in order. This is where the art of memory transforms thought into something tangible. But the mind is not just a repository. It must also transform and adapt, reconfiguring spaces, rearranging details to fit new knowledge into an ever-growing structure. In this way, memory becomes both a science and an art, structured, precise, yet infinitely flexible, a mind shaped by the world, and the world shaped by the mind. The third step is where the art of memory truly reveals its brilliance. It turns the mind into a theater, where ideas are not just stored but performed. The clever twist lies in the arrangement of the images. They are not placed randomly, but with intention, so that the mind can trace them with ease and precision. This is where memory becomes more than a tool. It becomes a kind of alchemy, transforming the abstract into the tangible, the fleeting into the eternal. The mind is not just a vessel. It is a canvas, and the memory artist is the painter who shapes the world through the power of imagination. In this final stage, the memory becomes a living thing, a performance that can be revisited, reimagined, and reenacted at will. Beneath the grandeur of art and philosophy, there was a science that shaped the Renaissance mind. It was not just about beauty, but about precision, about how the mind could be made to remember, to recall, to reconstruct. This science was called mnemonics, a system of memory that turned thought into image, and image into memory. It was a kind of alchemy, transforming the abstract into the tangible, the fleeting into the eternal. The mind was not a vessel to be filled, but a forge to be shaped. The Renaissance thinkers saw memory not as a passive record, but as an active process, a craft that could be refined, sharpened, and made precise. They used tools, mnemonic devices, memory palaces, associations, and hierarchies that allowed them to store and retrieve information with a kind of mechanical elegance, like gears turning in a clockwork mind. This science was not just practical, it was philosophical. It questioned the nature of knowledge, the limits of the human mind, and the possibility of mastery over memory itself. It was a mirror held up to the soul. The Renaissance mind did not merely imagine a world of beauty and reason. It sought to understand the mechanics of how that world could be remembered, preserved, and passed on. Memory, in the end, was the foundation of all human achievement. Imagine a clockwork heart, its gears clicking with purpose, each tick a memory, each talk a thought. Its rhythm is the mind's pulse, its gears the mind's architecture. It does not think, it does not feel, but it remembers. Each cog is a memory, each spring a thought, and together they mimic the mind's relentless ticking. The mind, like this mechanism, is a collection of parts, some delicate, some robust, each contributing to the grand design of thought and recollection. It is gloriously dumb in its simplicity, and it captures the essence of memory with startling accuracy. It is not alive, but it is real. And so, in this mechanical heart, we find a mirror to the human mind. Not in its soul, but in its structure, its rhythm, its relentless, silent ticking. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. Imagine a world where knowledge was locked inside the minds of a few. Before books, memory was the only way to preserve history, culture, and truth. Then, something changed. A single press, a few pages, and the floodgates of knowledge opened. The word was no longer a secret, but a weapon, a beacon, and a burden. This is the story of how memory was replaced by print, and how the written word reshaped the very fabric of human thought and society. We are standing at the threshold of a revolution, not of arms, but of ideas. The rise of the printed word changed everything, and nothing. So what exactly are we talking about? It's not just books, it's the shift from oral tradition to written record. Memory was once the sole repository of knowledge, until the printed page took that burden upon itself. In the preprint era, a society's memory was carried in the minds of its storytellers, priests, and scribes. Now, knowledge could be preserved, copied, and distributed across vast distances with unprecedented speed. The printed word created a new kind of culture, one where the past could be preserved, yet also manipulated. It was no longer enough to remember. One had to read, interpret, and question. This shift was not just about technology. It was about power, identity, and the very nature of truth. Who controlled the printing press, controlled the narrative of history. The age of print didn't just change how we stored knowledge. It changed how we thought about it. Memory was no longer the only way to know the world. It was just one of many. You might think this is just about books, but it's about how we remember the world. Print changed the way we hold on to the past, and in doing so, it reshaped the very way we think about truth and memory. Before print, memory was a living thing, passed from one person to another like a flame. Now, it's fixed in ink, and we can't help but treat it as if it's eternal, even though it's not. Print gave us the illusion of permanence, but in truth, it's a fragile thing. We now trust the written word more than the spoken, even though the spoken word carries the warmth of a person's voice and the weight of their presence. This shift has had deep consequences. We no longer remember things the way we once did, and we no longer value memory the way we once did. It's a quiet revolution, but it's one that has shaped our minds for centuries. So, yes, you might not think about it, but you should. Because when you pick up a book, you're not just holding paper and ink. You're holding a piece of history, a piece of memory, and a piece of who we are. In the 15th century, Johannes Gutenberg's press transformed the world. For the first time, knowledge was no longer locked in the minds of scribes or the hands of monks. Each printed book was a miracle, a convergence of metal, ink, and human ambition. It was not just information, it was power made tangible. With every printed page, memory shifted. The mind no longer had to carry the weight of the world. It could now delegate that burden to the page. The printed word became a new kind of memory, collective, shared, and fragile. It was the first step toward a global consciousness. In the age of print, the past was no longer just remembered. It was printed, preserved, and made accessible to all who could read. Imagine you have a story you want to tell. Before books, you had to remember it all in your head, like a song or a joke. You tell it to your friends, and maybe even your parents. Now, imagine you write it down. You put it in a book, and then you can share it with more people. It's like giving your story a home, so it doesn't get lost or forgotten. But writing it down also changes how you remember. You don't need to hold the whole story in your head anymore. You can read it again, and it stays the same every time. So, writing is like making a memory that lives on. It's not just for the writer. It's for everyone who reads it. That's how stories grow and stay forever. In the dim glow of a monastery scriptorium, scribes hunched over their desks, their hands stained with ink and dust. The air was thick with the scent of vellum and beeswax, a place where the past was preserved and the future was written. Each letter was a labor of love, a slow and deliberate act. The scribe's quill moved in measured strokes, tracing the shapes of words that would outlive their maker and shape the minds of generations. The tools were simple but precise: quills, inkwells, and the sacred vellum. Each item was a link in the chain of transmission, a bridge between the scribe and the reader who would come centuries later. This was the first step in the journey of the printed word, a ritual of patience, precision, and purpose. The scribe did not just write. They conjured the past and laid the foundation for the future. The printing press is not just a tool, but a system of precise mechanical interplay. Each part must move in harmony to produce the desired result. At the heart of this system is the chase, a metal plate that holds the type in place. It is the foundation upon which the entire composition rests. Once set, the press is inked, and the printing surface is brought into contact with the paper, pressing the ink into the fibers with force and purpose. The final step is the extraction of the printed sheet, a moment of revelation and repetition, as the press continues its work of transformation. The third step in this transformation is the clever twist. How print doesn't just replace memory, but restructures it. It doesn't just store knowledge, it changes the way we think about it. With print, knowledge becomes fixed, stable, and shared. It's no longer a private, oral inheritance. It's a public, physical object that can be passed, sold, and debated. Print introduces a new kind of trust. Trust in the written word as a reliable, objective truth. It's a shift from the fluidity of memory to the permanence of ink. This clever twist is not just about technology. It's about the redefinition of knowledge itself. Print gives memory a home, but it also reshapes the mind's role in preserving and interpreting the past. In the quiet of a monastery scriptorium, the ink settles on parchment, a silent revolution taking shape. The mind, once the sole repository of human knowledge, now finds itself sharing its burden with the page. The printed page is not merely a vessel for words. It is a catalyst for change. The brain, once engaged in the labor of memory, now finds itself freed to wander into new realms of thought. The science of memory is not in the mind alone. It is in the rhythm of the page, the weight of the ink, the structure of the letter. These are the tools that shape how we think, how we remember. Print does not replace memory. It transforms it. It gives the mind a new kind of freedom, a new kind of responsibility. To read is to engage with a world that is no longer solely within. In the age of print, the mind is no longer a solitary vault. It is a network, a system, a shared space where thought and memory are built, preserved, and passed on. Imagine a world where the act of remembering is like trying to carry water in a sieve. Every drop slips through, and you're left with nothing but the echo of what once was. Now picture a printing press, a mechanical beast with gears and ink, grinding out copies of the same words, each one a stone in a vast river of knowledge. The mind is a fragile vessel. The page is a fortress. One fades with time, the other endures, even as the world turns. To print is to trust in the world, not the mind. To print is to let the past live in the present, in ink and paper, not in memory and myth. In the age of print, memory is no longer a private act. It becomes a public one, shared, preserved, and passed down like the words themselves. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. Imagine a world where the past was not a record, but a rumor, where facts were fleeting and truth was a ghost that vanished with the wind. In this world, memory was both a gift and a curse. A fragile thing, easily lost, easily distorted, and never quite reliable. But then came a shift, a quiet revolution in how we saw ourselves, how we recorded our thoughts, and how we understood reality itself. This is the story of how memory, once a private and unreliable thing, became the foundation of the modern mind, and how that transformation shaped the world we know today. It begins not with a grand idea, but with a single question. What if we could remember everything? We are talking about the moment when human thought began to shift from the familiar, the sacred, and the imagined, towards something new, the measurable, the quantifiable, and the testable. It was not just about books or knowledge, but about how we came to see the world through a lens of reason, logic, and the power of observation. It was memory that became the bridge between the past and the present, between belief and evidence, between tradition and transformation. The scientific revolution did not simply change what we knew. It changed how we knew, how we remembered, and how we came to trust our own minds. You might not realize it, but your own mind is a product of centuries of intellectual upheaval. The way you remember, reason, and interpret the world was not always like this. It was forged in the crucible of the scientific revolution. When you recall a moment, you're not just retrieving a memory. You're reconstructing it, reinterpreting it. This is a process that has evolved from the rigid, almost mystical ways of thinking that preceded it. This shift in thought is not just historical. It's embedded in the way you think, learn, and even dream. You are carrying the weight of these transformations in every thought you form. To truly understand your own mind, you must understand where it came from. The birth of the modern mind is not a distant event. It is the foundation of your present self. The Renaissance was not just a rebirth of art, but of thought. It was here, in the quiet candlelit libraries of Italy, that the seeds of the scientific mind were first sown. With the printing press, knowledge spread like wildfire. No longer confined to monasteries, ideas now flowed through the streets of Europe, fueling curiosity and challenging old truths. Descartes, in his quiet room, sought certainty. He questioned everything, even his own senses, until he found one truth. He was thinking, and therefore, he existed. By the 18th century, the Enlightenment thinkers have laid a new foundation. Reason, observation, and skepticism became the tools of the modern mind, replacing blind faith and tradition. This shift was not just intellectual. It was cultural, emotional, and deeply personal. The mind was no longer a vessel for the divine. It was a laboratory for the human. Imagine a world where remembering is like carrying a book of your life. Now, imagine someone finds a way to write that book down, and it changes everything. Before that, people remembered things in their heads like stories. But sometimes they forget. Now, they could write it down and never lose it. It's like when you learn to read, and suddenly you can see the world in new ways. That's what happened when people started to write down their thoughts. So, the core idea is this. By writing down our memories, we change how we think, and that's how the modern world began. We begin not in the grand halls of a university, but in the quiet solitude of a scholar's study. The air is thick with the scent of parchment and ink, and the dim light filters through dusty windows, casting long, solemn shadows across the worn wooden desk. Before the mind could shape the world, it had to be set in motion. The scholar, with quill in hand, traces the first lines of inquiry, questions that will unravel the fabric of reality itself. These are not idle musings, but the seeds of a new understanding. This is the moment of intellectual birth. The mind, like a clockwork mechanism, is being wound with the first turns of curiosity and reason. The world is not yet known, but the gears of inquiry have been set in motion. The setup is not just of instruments, but of a mind prepared to measure, to question, to see the world not as it has always been, but as it might be. This is the first step toward a new way of knowing. In this quiet, deliberate act of preparation, the foundations of modern thought are laid. The mind is not just observing. It is becoming a tool of discovery, shaped by the very questions it seeks to answer. The second step in this mechanism is the act of encoding, transforming fleeting impressions into lasting impressions. It is the mind's first attempt to anchor the world in memory. This process is not passive. The mind sifts, selects, and structures the input. It is like a sculptor shaping clay, not merely capturing form, but giving it meaning. Encoding is the silent revolution of the mind. It is not just about remembering, but about understanding. It is the moment when the world is not just seen, but made sense of. This act of encoding is the foundation of all knowledge. Without it, experience remains raw, unformed, and unconnected. It is the first step in turning the world into memory. The mind, in encoding, becomes both a witness and a creator. It does not merely record the world. It reshapes it into something that can be known. The clever twist lay in the idea that memory itself was not merely a passive vault, but an active process of reconstruction. This revelation reframed the mind not as a mere recorder, but as an architect of its own past. It was a shift from seeing memory as a mirror to understanding it as a lens, one that could be bent, shaped, and even reimagined. This insight opened the door to a new kind of inquiry into the nature of human cognition. This shift from passive storage to active construction was not just a philosophical breakthrough. It was a methodological revolution. It allowed for the systematic study of how we recall, misremember, and even invent the past. The mind, once seen as an archive, was now understood as a workshop. And in that workshop, the past could be reassembled, revised, and reinterpreted. A process that would shape the very foundation of modern science and thought. This reimagining of memory was the final stroke in a masterpiece of thought. It transformed the way we see knowledge itself, not as something fixed, but as something dynamic, evolving, and endlessly revisitable. Beneath the grand arc of history, there is a quiet hum, a pulse of method, of measure, of meticulous inquiry that shaped the mind's own machinery. This is not just the story of discovery, but of the silent revolution of thought. The mind, once thought a vessel for memory, became a laboratory of precision. The scientific revolution did not merely observe the world. It redefined how we saw it, how we recorded it, and how we believed it could be known. This shift was not immediate, nor was it universal. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling of the senses, from the sacred and into the realm of the quantifiable, a transformation that would reverberate through the very structure of human understanding. The mind, once guided by faith and tradition, now found itself in the company of instruments and equations. It was no longer a passive recipient of revelation, but an active participant in the construction of knowledge. This hum beneath the surface of history was not loud, but it was relentless. It reshaped how we saw the world, how we remembered it, and how we imagined the future. Imagine a clockwork brain, gears turning with the precision of a Renaissance engineer, each cog a memory, each click a thought. It's not perfect, but it captures the essence of how the mind once functioned, mechanical, rigid, yet eerily functional. This clock is not a metaphor for the mind, but a mirror to it. It lacks emotion, context, and the fluidity of human thought, yet it holds the same kind of truth. Each movement is a memory, each tick a thought in the making. The clock does not understand time, yet it measures it. The mind does not understand memory, yet it is shaped by it. Both are tools, both are prisons, both are revelations. This is the glory of the analogy. It is not smart, it is not profound, but it is accurate. It speaks in the language of the mind itself, mechanical, linear, and strangely human. In the end, the mind is not a machine, but it is, in its way, a clock. And in understanding that, we come closer to understanding what it means to think, to remember, and to be human. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You've probably never thought about it, but your memories are no longer just in your head. They're now living in the cloud, waiting for a password, a search bar, or a neural network to pull them back into focus. I used to think of memory as something fragile, something you could lose, forget, or fade. But now, it's something you can store, sort, and even enhance. It's no longer just a part of you, it's a file. We've given up the idea of forgetting. We've traded the natural erosion of memory for the cold precision of data. It's a kind of immortality, but it's also a kind of alienation. You're not remembering, you're retrieving. There's a strange comfort in knowing your past is safe, your moments preserved. But there's also a quiet loneliness in it. You're not just holding on to memories, you're holding on to a version of yourself that might not be entirely yours anymore. We're talking about the quiet transformation of memory itself, not just the way we store it, but the way we experience it. It's no longer locked in the fragile, fleeting human mind. Every photo, every message, every thought is now a file, a pixel, a cloud. It's like we've outsourced our past to a server, and it's no longer ours to hold, but to access. We no longer remember by feeling, by instinct, by the weight of time. We remember by searching, by clicking, by algorithms that decide what's worth remembering. There's a kind of poetry in this shift, a loss of the ephemeral, the unspoken, the unrecorded. But there's also a loneliness, a detachment from the very thing that makes us human. We're not just losing memory. We're losing the soul of memory. The moments that once shaped us are now just data, waiting to be retrieved, but never quite the same. You think you're just uploading photos, but you're not. You're erasing the way you remember them, the way you felt when you first saw them, the way they made you feel in the dark of a rainy night. Every click is a choice. You're not just saving memories, you're trading them for something that can be lost, deleted, or corrupted. What if the cloud forgets? What if the algorithm decides your past doesn't matter anymore? We tell ourselves we're preserving memories, but we're also making them fragile. They're now dependent on systems we don't control, and we're too busy to think about what that means. There's a beauty in the impermanence of physical memory. Its weight, its texture, the way it resists being forgotten. But in the digital world, memory is weightless. And sometimes it feels like it's not really there at all. I remember when the world was measured in days, not data. We kept memories in our heads, and stories passed down like heirlooms. Then came the camera, the recorder, the notebook. We tried to capture it, to hold on, but it always slipped through our fingers. Then came the computer. We stored our lives in files, in folders, in the cloud. It felt like we were finally in control. But the more we tried to hold on, the more we lost. The memory became a thing we could delete, a thing we could forget. Now I ask myself, where is the soul of a memory when it's just a file? Is it in the pixels or in the person who held it? You know when you forget where you put your toys, but your phone remembers? That's how we're learning to trust our machines more than our minds. We used to remember things like where we put our keys or the names of our friends. But now we just ask our phones. It's like we've outsourced our memories to something that doesn't care if we remember or not. We're not just forgetting things. We're forgetting how to feel them, how to remember them on our own. Maybe one day, we'll look back and wonder how we ever lived without remembering anything at all. I sit at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, a quiet anticipation in the air. The screen glows faintly, a silent promise of what is to come. I type the first line, a simple command, but it feels like an act of surrender. The world I know is about to be rewritten in ones and zeros. The process begins with a simple act, choosing what to save, what to let go. It's not just data. It's fragments of our lives, our stories, our memories. Each click is a decision, a moment of hesitation. I wonder, is this enough? Will the past ever be the same when it's only stored in the cloud? The screen fills with a progress bar, slow and steady. It's like watching time dissolve into something else, something intangible, yet real. And then, it's done. The memory is gone from my mind, but not from the machine. It's waiting, silent, in the ether, ready to be found again, or lost forever. You click the button and the memory is uploaded like a whisper into the cloud, a fragile echo of a moment that once lived in the flesh. The data travels through cables and satellites, a silent procession of ones and zeros, carrying the weight of human experience across the world. There it rests, in the vast, anonymous expanse of the internet, a memory without a body, a soul without a home. And if you forget the password, or the link, or the name, it may never be found again, lost in the quiet digital void. It's not just about storing data. It's about shaping how we remember. The algorithm doesn't just save it. It decides what to keep, what to fade, what to forget. We hand over our memories like old letters, trusting the machine to hold them. But it doesn't just hold them. It edits them, reshapes them, gives them a new life, a new story. There's a quiet intimacy in this, a kind of surrender. We no longer keep our memories in our heads, but in the minds of strangers, in the code of distant servers, in the silence between signals. The twist is that we are both the keepers and the kept. The machine holds our past, but we too are held by it. Our thoughts, our feelings, our sense of self, all now stitched into the fabric of the digital world. In the end, the machine doesn't just remember for us. It remembers with us. And in doing so, it changes how we remember ourselves. Neurons fire in quiet patterns, a silent language older than time. These circuits, once alive with memory, now whisper to circuits in silicon, their rhythms borrowed, their essence remixed. The mind, once a sanctuary of thought, now streams through cables in cloud, its depths mapped, its edges blurred. We are not just transferring memory, we are redefining what it means to hold it. The science behind this shift is elegant, almost poetic. It mimics the mind's architecture, but it lacks the soul of a mind that has lived, that has felt, that has known. We are building a digital archive of the self, but in the process, we may be forgetting how to live with the past, not as a record, but as a part of who we are. The science is clear. The future is unfolding. But in the silence between the data points, I wonder if we are losing something we can't measure, something we can't compute. Imagine your brain as a library and your memories as the books you've read. Now, think of the internet as a vast, ever-growing archive of every book ever written. It's not just a copy. It's a different kind of story, one that's always changing, always expanding, and never quite the same. The difference is that your memory is private, personal, and fragile. The internet is public, shared, and eternal. It doesn't forget, but it also doesn't care. It stores everything, even the things you wish you could unsee. The internet remembers what you've forgotten, but it also forgets what you've tried to remember. It's like a second brain, but one that doesn't understand the weight of what it holds. It just holds it and waits. In the end, the internet is not a memory. It's a mirror. It doesn't hold you, but it reflects you back in ways you may not always recognize. It's not your memory, but it's something like it. Something that feels like it might be enough. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You ever notice how your brain feels like a library, but your memory is more like a glitchy archive? You can always find what you're looking for, and sometimes you can even remember where you left your keys. Now imagine if that library wasn't just in your head, but in the sky. A vast, humming network of servers, whispering your thoughts back to you in milliseconds. But what does it mean to outsource your memory? Does it free your mind? Or does it make you more dependent on something you can't touch? This isn't just about convenience. It's about identity. What happens when your memories are no longer just yours, but someone else's too? The cloud isn't just a tool. It's a mirror, and it's starting to show us who we are and who we might become. We're talking about memory, not just the kind that lives in our brains, but the kind that now stored in data centers across the world. It's like the human mind has found a digital twin, one that can be copied, saved, and even enhanced. This isn't just about saving photos or emails. It's about the way we think, the way we remember, and how that process is now being outsourced to machines. It's like our minds are becoming interfaces for something bigger. We're not just storing information. We're shaping memory. The cloud becomes a second self, a companion, a curator of our lives. And in some ways, it's beginning to think for us. This shift is subtle, but profound. It's not just about what we remember, but how we come to know ourselves, and how technology is rewriting the very fabric of human cognition. The cloud and the mind are no longer separate. They're becoming one. And as we move further into this new era, we're forced to ask, what does it mean to remember, when memory is no longer just ours? You might think your memory is just your brain's way of storing stuff, but it's more than that. It's how you make sense of the world, how you feel connected to your past, and how you build your identity. When you upload your memories to the cloud, you're not just saving data, you're outsourcing part of yourself. It's like handing over a piece of your soul to a machine. You should care, because the more you rely on the cloud for memory, the more you risk losing touch with who you are. You're not just forgetting things, you're forgetting how you feel about them. The cloud is convenient, but it's also a mirror. It reflects your desires, your fears, and your choices. What you choose to save and what you choose to forget says something about you. In the end, the cloud might help you remember, but it can help you feel. And that's what makes the mind so precious, because it's not just about remembering, it's about feeling. Let's rewind to the 1940s, when the first computers were clunky machines, humming with vacuum tubes and filled with dust. Memory was a physical thing, stored in punch cards and magnetic drums, fragile and limited. It was the earliest form of digital memory, primitive but revolutionary. In the 1980s, personal computers began to take shape. Memory was still limited, but people started to think about it as something you could own. It was a shift from the collective to the individual, from the public to the private. The 2000s brought the rise of the internet and cloud storage. Suddenly, memory wasn't just on your machine. It could be anywhere. You could save a file and forget about it, trusting that it was safe in the ether. Today, the cloud is everywhere. Your memories, your files, your experiences, it's all just data, waiting to be retrieved. But what does it mean for the mind, for how we think, how we remember, how we feel? We've moved from owning memory to trusting it to the machine. But in doing so, we've also changed how we think, how we feel, how we hold on to the past. It's not just about storage, it's about identity, about what it means to remember. So imagine your brain is like a big squishy sponge. It soaks up all the stuff you learn, like stories, facts, and even your favorite songs. But sometimes it gets full and forgets some things. That's okay, it's just part of being human. Now, the cloud is like a big invisible box in the sky. It can hold all your stuff. Your photos, your videos, even your memories. But it doesn't think, it just stores. So you have to remember to tell it what to save. But here's the tricky part. The cloud doesn't know what you like. It just holds things. So you have to be the one who decides what to keep and what to let go. That's like being the librarian of your own mind. So the cloud helps you remember more, but it also makes you remember that you're still in charge of your memories. It's like a helper, but not a friend. You have to teach it what to remember, and you have to remember to teach it. You start with a device, a phone or a laptop, something you carry with you everywhere. It's more than just a tool. It's an extension of your mind, a pocket-sized archive of your thoughts, your memories, and your identity. But before it can remember anything, it has to be connected. You plug in a cable, or tap a screen, or speak a command. The moment you set it up, you're not just opening a device. You're opening a portal to a vast, invisible space where your mind can now live. Next, you choose where your data lives. It could be on a server in the cloud or on your own device, but either way, you're making a decision about where your thoughts will rest and who will have access to them. You set up encryption, permissions, and backup systems. It's not just about storing your memories. It's about protecting them, making sure that when you're not looking, your mind is still safe from the world. And then you wait. You don't have to do anything else. The machine is ready, waiting for you to speak, to think, to remember. It's not just a tool anymore. It's a witness to your mind, a silent keeper of your thoughts. When you click save, your data isn't just stored. It's broken into pieces, like a puzzle, and sent across the internet to a server deep in the cloud. These servers are like silent libraries, holding billions of memories in digital form, each one neatly labeled and organized for quick retrieval. But the real magic happens when you ask for something back. Your request travels through the internet, finds the right server, and pulls the data back out. almost like a memory being recalled. The cloud doesn't just store, it connects. It turns memory into something that can be shared, accessed, and even rebuilt across time and space. It's not just about saving data. It's about preserving thoughts, emotions, and experiences in a way that feels both foreign and familiar. So, the data isn't just stored, it's also organized, like the library with a system. Each memory is tagged, categorized, and given a place. So it's not just stored, it's understood. This is where AI steps in, learning from the patterns of how we use the data. It doesn't just store, it learns how we think, how we associate, how we recall. The twist isn't just about storage, it's about the way we interact with the past. We don't just retrieve memories, we shape them, and the system learns from that shaping. In this way, the cloud becomes more than a vault. It becomes a collaborator in our thinking. It doesn't just remember for us, it helps us remember how to remember. Neurons fire in patterns, etching memories like ink on paper. The mind is a biological archive, but the cloud is a digital one, built with ones and zeros, not synapses. Memory isn't just storage, it's a process, a dance between recall and reconstruction. The cloud, though, is static. It captures the moment, but not the feeling, not the nuance, not the weight of what was once lived. We are building systems that mimic memory, but we're forgetting that memory itself is a process. The cloud may hold data, but it can't hold the texture of a moment, the ache of absence, the spark of recognition. There's a quiet tension between the two, between the mind's fluidity and the cloud's precision. We're not just storing memories, we're redefining what it means to remember. Maybe the future isn't about replacing the mind with the cloud, but about learning to live with both, to carry the weight of memory not just in circuits, but in the quiet space between what is known and what is felt. Imagine your brain as a cluttered attic filled with old boxes, each one holding a memory. You can't find what you need, and it's getting harder to remember where anything is. Now, the cloud is like a warehouse down the street, bright, organized, and always open. You can access anything you need, and it's always there ready when you are. But the warehouse is cold. It doesn't remember what you feel, or what you miss, or what you fear. It just holds the data, never the emotion. So we have this paradox. The cloud is perfect, but it's not alive. The mind is imperfect, but it's alive. We're trying to make the cloud feel like the mind, but maybe we're trying to make the mind feel like the cloud. In the end, it's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding a way to let both coexist. The mind is a living archive, and the cloud is a living extension. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You've probably never thought about what happens to your memories after you die. But what if they could be preserved, stored, and even shared with the people you loved? Imagine your mind as a library of experiences, a vast archive of moments that shape who you are. But what if that library could be digitized, frozen in time, and passed on? The future of memory isn't just about storage. It's about identity, legacy, and the strange comfort of knowing that your life might continue in some form long after you're gone. What if your memories could be shared with your loved ones? Or even with strangers, as a way to connect across time and space? That's the question we're about to explore. We are talking about more than just data. We're talking about the essence of who we are. Memory is not just a record. It is the architecture of our identity, shaped by time, emotion, and experience. As technology advances, it promises to preserve these fragments of our lives indefinitely. Yet, it also raises a haunting question. What happens when the line between memory and reality begins to blur? The future of memory is not just about preservation, but about transformation. It challenges us to rethink what it means to be human and what we truly value in the passage of time. In this new era, we must ask ourselves, Are we creating a better way to remember? Or are we risking the erosion of what makes our memories meaningful and sacred? You think memory is just about remembering names or dates, but it's more than that. Memory shapes who you are. It's the quiet voice that guides you through the noise of life. When you lose your memories, you lose parts of yourself. It's not just forgetting, it's unraveling. The past once held in your mind becomes a stranger. If we outsource our memories to machines, we risk becoming something less than human. We risk forgetting what it means to remember, to feel, to be truly present. This isn't just about data. It's about legacy. It's about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we leave behind. What will remain when the machines are gone? You should care, because memory is the last thing that holds you to the past. And if you lose that, you lose everything. We began with clay tablets, etched with the weight of stories. Memory was fragile, a flicker in the dark, carried only by the hand that traced the symbols. Then came papyrus, the first whisper of permanence. Scrolls were buried in sand, waiting for the next hand to unearth them, hoping they'd still hold the words of the past. Then came the tape recorder, the first echo of the human voice. For the first time, we could preserve the intonation, the pause, the breath. But only for so long. Digital storage arrived like a promise. We could hold entire libraries in a single device. Yet even this new kind of permanence is fragile, and the future of memory is not guaranteed. And now, we stand at the threshold of something new. Memory is no longer just about remembering. It's about choosing, about control, about what we decide to keep, and what we let slip away. Imagine if your memories weren't just in your head, but in a box you could open. That's what digital memory is today. Like a treasure chest of your life, but it's not you. It's just a copy. But what if that box could remember more than you ever could? What if it could hold your dreams, your fears, even the things you forgot to tell yourself? Some people say it's not real. That memory is just a story your brain makes up. But what if it's more than that? What if it's the only thing that makes you, you? So when we put our memories in digital form, are we saving them, or are we losing something deeper? Something that can't be copied, or stored, or shared? Maybe the future of memory isn't about keeping the past. Maybe it's about learning how to live with it, and how to let go of what we can't hold. The process begins with a quiet room, a single machine humming with the weight of possibility. It's not the technology that matters, but the trust we place in it to preserve what we hold dear. You sit in front of it, not as a user, but as a participant in a delicate ritual. Your thoughts are not just stored, they are scanned, mapped, and made tangible in the language of ones and zeros. The machine listens, not with ears, but with sensors that trace the subtlest shifts in your breath, your pulse, the rhythm of your thoughts. It is not recording. It is translating your being into something that can outlive you. Each moment is a snapshot, but not of the world, of you. It's not just data. It's the weight of your presence, the texture of your silence, the echo of your voice in the quietest corners of your mind. And in that moment, you are not just preserving memory. You are becoming something more. A bridge between what was and what may yet be, tethered to the world by the fragile thread of your consciousness. The data is sliced into fragments, each a whisper of the past, encoded into a lattice of light and charge, held within the cold, silent heart of the machine. These fragments are not just bits of information, but echoes of experience. Memories, emotions, the weight of a moment preserved in a language only the machine understands. It is a silent alchemy, turning the ephemeral into the permanent, the human into the digital, a bridge between what was and what could be. And yet, even as it preserves, it erases, reducing the infinite complexity of a human mind to a series of ones and zeros, a loss of soul in the name of clarity. The machine does not remember. It stores. It retrieves. It never truly holds the past, only its shadow, reflected through the glass of technology. The twist isn't just about storing data. It's about shaping it. It's the quiet moment when memory isn't just remembered, but reinterpreted, made personal, made real. Imagine your memory as a living thing, not a static file. It grows, it changes, it evolves with you. The technology doesn't just record, it transforms. It's not about replacing memory, but enhancing it. It's not about forgetting, but about making sense of what we've already lost. The clever twist is that memory is no longer just a record of the past. It becomes a bridge to the future, a guide through the unknown, a way to remember not just what happened, but who we are becoming. Beneath the surface of every digital memory, there is a science that hums in quiet precision. A science that maps the fragile architecture of the mind, where thoughts are not just stored but shaped by the very act of remembering. Neuroscientists now trace the echoes of memory through synapses, through the slow firing of neurons, through the chemical ballet that turns experience into a traceable pattern. A pattern that can be read, maybe even rewritten. And yet, the more we try to capture it, the more it slips, like water through our fingers, like light through the cracks of time. The science can map the path, but it cannot hold the weight of what is remembered. We build machines to preserve what we cannot keep, but in doing so, we risk forgetting that memory is not just what is stored. It is what is felt, what is lived, what is lost, and what is never quite the same again. The future of memory is not just about storage. It is about understanding, about honoring the weight of what we carry, and about asking whether we are trying to remember or to change what we have forgotten. We think of memory as a vault, but it's more like a river, flowing, shifting, and never still. The past is not a thing we can hold, but a current that carries us forward. The digital age tries to dam that river, to store its flow in rigid containers. But memory is not meant to be captured. It's meant to be lived. We build temples of data, hoping they will preserve us. But the more we try to control memory, the more it escapes our grasp, like sand through our fingers. The future of memory is not in the cloud, but in the silence between the sounds. It is in the spaces where we remember without needing to record. So let us not try to freeze memory in time. Let it flow, let it fade, let it be part of the story we tell ourselves, without needing to tell it again. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You ever notice how sometimes the most ordinary things remind you of something deeper? Like the way your mom's hands always seem to know exactly how to fix anything. Now, imagine those hands replaced by a robot. Precise, unflinching, but missing that quiet understanding that made everything feel right. It's not just about what we do, but how we do it. How our actions hold the weight of memories, even when we don't realize it. In a world that's getting more connected every day, sometimes it's the most human things that feel the most distant. So maybe the answer isn't about choosing between technology and memory. It's about keeping the human in the machine. We're talking about the fragile thread that connects who we are to how we remember. It's not just about facts and dates. It's about the weight of a moment, the echo of a voice, the ache of a loss that lingers in the silence between words. We're talking about how technology can capture the surface of a memory, but not the soul beneath it. It can store a photo, but it can't hold the laughter that made it worth remembering. We're talking about how the human touch, the quiet, unspoken moments, can shape the way we remember. A hand on the shoulder, a shared silence, the glance that says more than words ever could. We're talking about the balance between remembering and forgetting, between holding on and moving forward. It's not about perfection. It's about presence, about being with the memories without being consumed by them. You think you're just uploading photos to a cloud, but you're quietly preserving the last laugh of someone who may never laugh again. You're not just storing data. You're storing hope. The chance that one day someone will remember how they used to feel. You're holding on to the past, not because you have to, but because you want to. For the people who are still here, waiting for you to tell them they're not forgotten. And in that moment, you realize that even in a world of AI and automation, the most human thing we can do is remember. And that's something worth fighting for. I remember the days when a phone call meant more than a screen and a dial. It was a voice, a pause, a breath. Moments that built a life, not just a timeline. We used to write letters, fold them, and wait for the postman to bring a piece of someone's heart across the world. Now, it's all instant, and sometimes we forget what it feels like to wait. The internet connects us, but it also distances us. We scroll through lives, yet feel more alone. The question is, where does the soul live in a world that's always online? We've built machines that remember everything, but they can't remember what it means to feel. The real magic isn't in the data. It's in the silence between the words, the touch of a hand, the look in someone's eye. Memory is not just what we store. It's what we carry. It's the weight of a moment, the echo of a voice, the warmth of a touch. And sometimes it's the only thing that keeps us human. You know that feeling when you're holding a photo and it's like the person is right there, smiling at you? That's memory, and it's made of things that can't be fixed, just felt. Technology can help us remember, but it can't replace the way a real person makes us feel seen. The best memories are like a hug. They don't last forever, but they stay with you forever. The first step is to gather the pieces, letters, photos, and objects that hold meaning. These are the fragments of a life, the whispers of the past waiting to be heard. I sit down with them, not just as a collector, but as a keeper of stories. Every item has a reason for being here, and I listen to the silence between the words. This is where memory begins to stir. The items are not just objects, they are portals, guiding me back to the person who once held them. I take notes, not just to remember, but to honor. Each word is a bridge between the past and the present, a way to carry the soul of memory forward. It's not just about collecting memories. It's about giving them a home, a voice, and a place to live again in the heart of someone who once loved them. The heart of it is a quiet hum, a gentle pulse beneath the skin of the machine. It's not just wires and circuits. It's a bridge between what was and what can be remembered. Every memory is a thread, woven into this mechanism with care. It doesn't just store. It listens, it feels, it holds the weight of what we've lost. The machine doesn't replace the soul. It gives it space. It doesn't erase the past. It lets it live on in a way that feels like it's still breathing. And in this quiet moment, the mechanism becomes a mirror. It reflects not just the memory, but the person who holds it. Fragile, real, and alive. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. About the way a memory can be held, not just stored, but felt, as if it's still here, still part of us. The clever twist isn't about replacing the past, but about holding it in a way that feels alive again. It's not just recording memory, it's giving it a heartbeat. It's about using technology not to erase the human, but to enhance the human, to let the past speak through the present, not in the voice of machines, but in the voice of those who lived it. This twist lies in the idea that memory isn't just stored, it's shared. And when we share it with care, we don't just preserve it, we revive it. The clever twist is also in the quiet moments, when a person pauses, remembers, and lets the past breathe again in the present. Not through screens, but through connection. It's not about making the past perfect, but about making it feel real again. And in that, we honor the soul of memory, not as a relic, but as a living, breathing part of who we are. There's a rhythm to memory, a pulse beneath the silence of time. It's not just what we remember, but how we feel when we do. These moments are written in the brain, but they live in the heart. Neuroscience tells us that memory is a web of connections, but it's the emotion that weaves it into something real. The science is there, but it's the story that gives it meaning. The brain is a map of experiences, and memory is the compass that guides us through the unknown. It's not just about the past, it's about how we carry it forward. Science can measure the pathways, but it can't capture the warmth of a shared moment. It's the human touch that turns data into soul and memory into something sacred. You know when you're trying to explain something to a kid and you say, imagine a big fluffy cloud that can think and remember things. It's not perfect, but it works. It's the kind of metaphor that doesn't need to be precise, just true enough to touch something deep. Technology is like that cloud. It's big, it's fluffy, and it can carry your memories if you let it. But it's not the cloud that holds your past. It's the way you look up and see it, the way you feel its presence in your mind. We're all trying to hold on to something, to remember, to connect. And sometimes the best way to do that is by not trying to make it perfect, but just letting it be. A cloud, a memory, a moment, a feeling. So maybe the answer isn't in the technology, or the memory, or the cloud. It's in the way we look up, the way we feel it, and the way we choose to be still, even in the middle of everything. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.